Meet the new heroes of The Last Jedi. The evil First Order threatens the galaxy, and only General Leia Organa's brave resistance stands in their way. When the peaceful world Atera Bravo is under attack, their crack bomber group Cobalt Squadron is called on to help. Rose and Paige Tico, refugees from the First Order's devastation, now fighting for freedom with Cobalt Squadron, must devise a daring plan to help the people of Atera Bravo right under the enemy's nose. But will the sisters' actions save the planet or lead to all-out war? A thrilling adventure featuring new heroes from the blockbuster Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Hello, younglings, and welcome to the Padawan Library, the junior novel Star Wars podcast. We're the only ones. Get used to it. I'm Levi Paratic. With me is Tim May. I didn't put any thought into this intro. I'm winging it. Very confrontational. I have been confrontational today on Instagram.
Well, listen. We'll get into a couple little things here. This is going to be a shorter episode. You've got plans. I've been up since 12:30 a.m.
Oh, nice.
And I still have to edit the episode, so this is going to be closer to the length of the last couple. An hour-ish. So
that's good. It's a good length,
which is a fine length. Listen, all my favorite podcasts put out 3 or 4 hour podcasts, which is insane. I just listened to a 3-hour episode of the great podcast Blank Check this morning, and I don't regret a single moment of that. But it was delightful. But you know what? We are not that good is the problem. So I don't think we could vamp for 3 hours. I guess probably
no. There's no.
Probably our Rise of Skywalker episode will be.
Yeah, we could.
I don't know if it'll be 3 hours, but that will be long. So Get ready for that, and we'll be back to a normal length after the hiatus. I don't know. We might just be burnt out.
The hiatus I am definitely looking forward to just to breathe.
Might just be burnout. And sorry if that's affecting the quality of the show. But I will say this. This episode, we're covering Cobalt Squadron, which is a Last Jedi tie-in book that features, that's mostly about Rose Tico from that film. And you posted something about us reading this book next.
Yes.
On Instagram.
Yes, there's a photo of Kelly Marie Tran holding the book.
Yeah, she do the audiobook for this?
She did do the audiobook, and I didn't know that until after I finished the book, and had I known that, I would have maybe actually listened to it.
That would be cool. But regardless, you posted it and you said anybody making stupid comments about her character or her will be their library card will be revoked, which I appreciated. And apparently you had to do that with someone, so that sucks.
Yes, somebody who we've mentioned on the show last week, who since that episode I've only posted 3 times.
And they've commented on everything, and
it's been negative every time.
Yeah,
every time.
You just posted some that picture of an oven with a Kylo Ren thing on it or something from Lowe's or something.
Yeah.
And he was just ugh, Kylo Ren sucks or something. I can't read.
No. I'm actually gonna read what he said because
wasn't it about Darth Caedus or something?
Yeah, it was about Darth Caedus, and it's gone now that I think because I blocked this character. The comment I believe is gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was about Darth Caedus and
Caedus,
and he
not
was
to be too much like that guy, but yeah.
Oh, you know what? This guy he keeps shitting on the new canon, and we have our mixed opinions on the new canon. I definitely have my mixed opinions.
Yeah, listen,
on the new
we've
canon.
been relatively negative on every book we've read from the new canon so far, other than Master and Apprentice, which is not
right.
Again, it was a special circumstance, but although that might change today, I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Stay tuned. But anyway, that doesn't. But I don't know. There's just a certain tone with some Star Wars fans. I just can't do it. I can't. I know. I mentioned that podcast I listen to, Blank Check, which is a very popular podcast. I'm not alone in that. But that show started as a Star Wars podcast, and I got into it after. Because it was the whole bit was that they were talking about the prequels as if they were the only movies that existed, so they called it the Phantom Menace trilogy and all this stuff, which is funny, a funny bit. I've listened to a couple of them, and I know they're not very high on the prequels, which they're not annoying about it, but regardless. Mm-hmm. I just get so stressed out listening to people talk about Star Wars or reading people talk about... you know what I mean? Even people I like... I know. Even people I like and respect and, I love, everything else they do, I just, when they're talking about Star Wars, I'm if you say something, and this is unfair to them and completely my own bullshit, but it's this is going... you know what I mean? It just stresses me out.
When it comes to Star Wars fans, if somebody's I'm a Star Wars fan, I'm not immediately attached to that person. They're very ranging emotions when it comes to Star Wars, and it's
and I can respect a lot of opinions about Star Wars, but I can almost never listen to any. or read it, you know what I mean?
I know.
There are a very narrow amount of people that I like to talk about Star Wars with. It's essentially all people in my real life. It's my brother, you... Sam, who's been on the show, and a couple other people that haven't been on the show, but I don't know. There's a very specific, we've talked about this before. We basically enjoy all major Star Wars content, all the movies, basically on one level or another. So we are in a very narrow wedge, of people, and it stresses me out. I know it's dumb, but it does.
Yeah, I mean, this character, it was just we are trying to host positivity. We're putting positivity out there. There's so much negativity when it comes to Star Wars on the internet.
The only episode he ever listened to was the one with the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood argument.
That might have been it, and he was oh, this episode is for me.
And listen, that was a personal argument. That had almost nothing to do with even that movie. That was essentially a personal argument. So it's it had to do with the movie, but it wasn't it wasn't that focused on the movie. If you read between the lines...
I know. Because I laughed so hard where it was later you were just you still gave the movie 4 stars. You still liked the movie.
I know, that is so funny. Listen, and I still think you're totally wrong on that, but that's fine. That's fine. We're not getting into it. If we talk about our favorite films of the decade in some bonus segment or something, you're going to be furious, so I feel we're not going to do that, even though that seems like a fun thing to do. But... you'll just be every movie I pick, you'll just be oh, I don't know, not 5 stars or something. So, listen, whatever. I don't know. It's Thursday, the 21st.
New episode of the 21st. New episode of The Mandalorian comes out tomorrow. Very excited for that.
We didn't talk about the second episode, and we don't need to talk at length about it, but it was great. I had such a good time.
I mean, just like the rest of the universe, I have baby fever. I have Yoda baby, baby Yoda fever. Yes, who cried when he saw it.
It was heartbreakingly beautiful.
who's never seen a Star Wars movie.
I love him.
Like...
I love it. Oh, I love that. Like Star Wars fans are getting to enjoy the majesty of Werner Herzog. You know, because like a lot of them probably only vaguely knew who he was, if at all, before this. And you know, that guy is just—he's a wonderful character. What a character!
What a character indeed.
And the big thing I loved in this song, though, was the big the big sandcrawler action sequence was so cool. It was like the Super Star Wars level and everything. Everybody's been saying that, but like I just thought it was like really well staged. The director of this one was Rick Famuyiwa, who I haven't actually seen any of his movies. He made Dope. I know.
Okay. I've seen Dope.
Which I know, like people have mixed opinions about, but I've always heard it's well directed.
Yes,
but
I have mixed opinions on that movie.
Sure,
I still don't understand what bitcoins are, and the big focus of the movie is Bitcoin.
Really, that seems ahead of the curve on that, because
it was ahead of the curve. That's
like more of a thing from last year than 4 years ago.
It was way ahead of the curve because that's where I learned what a Bitcoin was, but I was still just like confused by what it is. So
yeah, I'm still confused by Bitcoin. You know, listen, you know, it's like a more confusing version of stocks, like which is already confusing. You know, I don't understand it. But
I don't either. But
anyway, yeah. So yeah, we got. I'm enjoying the weekly schedule, although you know I've been jonesing, but we're only a few hours away now.
Now you messaged me and said you've watched every episode 3 times. Have you watched any more?
I've watched both episodes. Well, I've watched the first episode. I watched 3 times. The second episode I watched 4 times because it's only a half hour, so I just like throw it on. Like I'll be up early in the morning and I'll like be getting ready for school and I'll just like, let's throw on the Mandalorian and like I'll just like watch those sequences. It's incredible. I just the vibe is so. It feels so good, you know, and it has actually really relaxed me about Star Wars, like the state of Star Wars, which I was never like. I'm not as like crazy as some people, like whatever. Like if I don't like the new stuff, I don't like the new stuff. It doesn't matter to me because I have a life. I'm a real person. I don't put all my happiness into the state of a cinematic franchise. But it has like it really. I feel like I'll be fine if I hate Rise of Skywalker now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the current where we're at now, we got this show and the upcoming shows. Even like Cassian Andor, even though I don't like Rogue One that much, he's an interesting character and like that's a good format. And the Americans guys working on it and all that. And like Obi-Wan, like the fact that the near future of Star Wars is mostly these shows and obviously books and whatnot, like that, that's just what I want. I want low-key, fun start. Like, what I love about The Mandalorian is it feels like an old-style adventure TV show. Like, I went through a phase a couple years ago where I was watching all these old 50s, like, Robin Hood, this 50s Robin Hood TV show. There was like 50 episodes or something, and it was like one season of 50 episodes or some craziness. And like, it kind of feels like that, just with like an insanely high budget. Like that kind of thing where it's just like fun, little, discrete adventures that add up to maybe a little bit of an arc, but like, obviously more of an arc here. But like, it's a delight. And yeah, the baby Yoda is... He's
so cute.
It's undeniable.
He's so undeniably cute and ridiculous. Just like already so wise and just.
Yeah, we'll see. Listen. The one way this show wouldn't go off the rails for me, but I just don't. I'm very interested in. I hope the character is never directly connected to Yoda,
right?
Or Yaddle, but that definitely won't happen. But
what I love that they withheld this. Like, they kept this a secret. Amazing, it was such a amazing surprise. Apparently, they do have toys but they withheld the toys so they wouldn't spoil this, and now they're worried that they are not going to get the toys on shelves before Christmas. So
mistake.
I know they kind of Hasbro screwed up. Hasbro's been, I'm attacking Hasbro here. You've been flubbing the ball for a long while. Ever since George hasn't been watching over you guys. You guys have been flubbing it left and right.
Yeah, there's also the collapse of the retail toy business.
Yes,
I think hurts. Without a huge retailer like Toys R Us, that's a difficult.
That's true.
Thing.
That's true.
I will say this one last thing, and then we'll move on to the book because we don't have that much time today. But
I have one thing to say after this. So
okay, whatever.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
We're not recapping the book, so in the way that we used to. So whatever, we'll be able to talk about it. The one thing I do have to say is, I wanted to ask you.
What?
You and I are sharing a Disney Plus account. Come after us, Bob Iger, sharing accounts, but but whatever. So, have you watched anything besides The Mandalorian on Disney Plus?
Okay, well, I've watched The Mandalorian, and that's actually perfectly segues into this. I got back into Clone Wars today, and I have. It's the first appearance of Tarkin in the series, so that was.
Which episode is that?
I can't remember the name, but they have to go to this prison, the Citadel, and rescue the elf.
That's a great arc. I love that.
Yeah. And that also tying this back into our show, the warden of the prison is a Findian, same species as Guerrera and Paxi Deirdre.
Clone Wars is filled with stuff like that. There's just so many just references. Clone Wars and Rebels are both filled with deep EU references, and if you hate whatever, Clone Wars 79 aside, if you hate Rebels because it's Disney or whatever, and I'm talking about that commenter that we banned, that guy is a clown. I don't know what to even tell you about that. That's that show. If you are into the expanded universe, that show essentially it doesn't fit perfectly because they kind of rewrite the Thrawn story in in Rebels, but that show tonally feels so classic EU, and so does The Mandalorian, by the way. That's it feels so pre-prequels EU, which is the sweet spot for me, in terms of what I have an attachment to is that Bantam era.
Right, so. And with Rebels too, I already know how Rebels turns out, and how a certain character whose name I won't mention shows up at the end, and that they basically add to this character's devious scheme. They add another level to his master scheme another layer on the cake.
You gotta. What season is the Citadel in?
This is season 3.
Okay,
so
you got a while still to go.
Yeah, I have 4 episodes left in season 3, and then I'm on to season 4.
Really 2.5 seasons, because 6 is only 12 episodes. But and then you watched 4 Rebels seasons.
Yes, and then I've watched. I started that today. I watched that Imagineering documentary, which was fine. It's good.
Have you watched the second episode of that, or
not yet?
Yeah,
no,
I haven't started it. It looks like something I would just enjoy watching, but maybe not that revelatory.
It's totally enjoyable. It's basically just the straight story of how Disney built Disneyland and Disney World, and it's a story we've all heard before, but lots of fun B-roll. It honestly kind of reminded me of you ever watch Defunctland?
I watched
that guy.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that, but on a much higher scale than him.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, much
better footage.
To be fair, I talk a lot of shit about YouTube people. That guy does very solid work. On an amateur level, he gets a lot of good footage, and
yes, he does.
It's good. He's not just he knows not to put his dumb face on screen and him talking like in an underlit room I look to you right now because we're recording this on FaceTime. He knows that's not what people want to watch. Mm-hmm. So props to him on that. But then I've been watching some Gargoyles, which is a great show. I'm kind of surprised they haven't done a reboot. I assume that's going to happen soon.
You would think so.
But
since DuckTales got a reboot.
I want a much better reboot than the DuckTales reboot. I've only watched 2 episodes of it. It's fine. I know people love it. I just can't get over the designs. I hate the designs. I think Carl Barks is rolling over in his grave. Anyway, enough Disney talk. We said we were going to keep the intro short. It's 18 minutes long. Do you still have something to talk about, or do you just want to talk about
No, because I just want to talk about Clone Wars.
All right, cool. When we get back, we're going to talk Cobalt Squadron, and we'll be out of your hair in about a half hour or two or something.
Yeah,
okay.
All right.
Bye. Welcome back to Padawan Library. I'm Tim May, here as always with Levi Paratek. Did we introduce ourselves last episode?
Yeah.
Last episode.
I think so. Yeah.
Last section. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, we did.
This week, in the library, in the study room, we...
the conference room. Boys and girls.
Yeah. Oh, boy. We have... Cobalt Squadron, which is actually, I should say, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Cobalt Squadron. This book was published obviously in the lead up to Last Jedi, and like I said, it's about Rose and Paige, Tico, and about a mission they do right before Force Awakens, really. So
yes.
But. We have our history with the new canon stuff so far. We've done the Rogue One book that I'm blanking.
Guardians of the
Wills, and we've done the 3 Join the Resistance books, which I think are some of our best episodes. But it's certainly the most classical pissy fan episodes we've ever done. But they're funny. They're funny. I hope you like those. If you want that side of us, that there you go. Check those out. But we've been, and then we did Myths and Fables, which is not really canon. But as far as the new books, that's what we've done, right? Am I missing one?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
All right, so.
Because Join the Resistance left such a bad taste in our mouth that we
we
don't come here very often.
We also spread that out over a whole summer, so it just was a disaster. We should have done 1 episode on this. Although then we would have had to read 3 books for 1 episode. Yeah. I don't know.
And read 700 pages worth of covers. That would have been a 3-hour episode.
It's oh god, the Ulysses of bullshit. Anyway, I don't even think Ulysses is actually that long. Anyway, I just think there's... but we've been pretty lukewarm at best on most of these books. I think Guardians of the Wills is the one we've been most positive on, and I was more positive on that than you. And looking back, I think that's solid. That's certainly in the mid-range of what we've covered in general. So, but... certainly we hated that. This book, I had some hope for because, for one thing, the main characters are Rose and Paige, and I love Rose. I love The Last Jedi, and
never did.
And the opening sequence with Paige is fucking awesome. One of the coolest action scenes that anybody has done in a Star Wars movie, honestly. So I was pretty these especially these tie-in books. This is, I think, the difficulty, and I want to say this before we get into the actual books. What we thought of it is, I think tie-in books, books that come out before a movie that are essentially exist to promote that movie, have a much tougher road to hoe. Join the Resistance is its own animal. That thing's that's just a disaster. That's all that is. That's just some weird thing. It shouldn't even really reflect on any other new canon books. It doesn't actually. It's its own weird thing. But these books, I read Join the Resistance. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've been dominated.
Well, this book falls in line with, like, Catalyst, a book that we would not cover on this show because it's an adult book, but a book we've talked at length about because of the way that it expands on the characters of Galen and Lyra Urso, and it really fleshes those characters out. And this book really could do the same.
You know who probably hates Catalyst, even though he likes every other James Luceno Star Wars book? That one commenter on our Instagram.
He probably does.
He's like, even though this is the exact same style of writing and the exact style of story that I like, I hate it.
Yep. So anyway, so this book kind of like can fall into that same vein just because, I mean, spoiler alert, Paige dies in the first 20 minutes of Last Jedi. I'll
say this about Last Jedi versus Rogue One. Like, if I had read this book before Last Jedi, I don't think I would have been annoyed at Paige's death because that sequence gives her enough of a moment that she's memorable regardless of whether you know any of her backstory. So, like, and then when you find out later in the movie that was Rose's sister, that has a little extra resonance. But whereas with not Galen's death, but Lyra's death specifically at the very beginning of Rogue One, like, she's just a lady. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's not, there's no resonance. Obviously, but then Jyn is not well handled in the film and all that stuff. I don't know.
And something else about Lyra, too, that kind of bothers me in the opening of that film is just, like, the fact that, like, she just abandons her daughter, essentially. I don't know. Like, Jyn stood a chance of at least having one parent, and this is no shots at Lyra, because I really like Lyra in that book. Yeah. But, like, in the movie, she just kind of makes this decision, and it's kind of a really dumb decision.
It's just clear that character was not considered as important, and I'm not talking about, like, they should have read this James Luceno book, like, that probably didn't exist. It's not that. Look at The Last Jedi. I doubt Rian Johnson read Cobalt Squadron or even talked. Maybe he talked to Elizabeth Wein. I know him and Claudia Gray talked about something in one of her books. I'm blanking. But
it might have been Leia.
Because that was a Last Jedi tie-in, technically.
Yep.
But anyway, so, like, maybe he did, but I'm guessing probably he didn't. But you know what? He just was like, this is a character that we're opening the movie with, and we need to give her some presence and give her some cool stuff to do before we kill her. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just better storytelling. Like, people that like Rogue One more than Last Jedi are insane.
I agree.
I know that many of our listeners I just called insane, and I apologize. But listen. It's weird to me, like, just, like, on a pure storytelling level, I think it's so much more hollow, but whatever.
And it meanders, Rogue One meanders so long before anything, like, actually happens in the movie, too. It's, like, it's very, very slow at the beginning of that film. But we should get into this book.
Sure.
Anyway, so you want to hear a little bit about Elizabeth, what would you say, Wein?
Wein, probably, yeah.
Wein, okay. Well, Elizabeth, this is her second Star Wars thing she's written.
Oh, really?
And the first thing she wrote was, of course, a short story for A Certain Point of View.
Wow.
Apparently...
The talent search continues.
Apparently, if you managed to squeeze your way into that book, you at least got one full book deal out of it.
I mean, there are actually writers I'm familiar with that are in that book that have not gotten a book, so...
well, maybe.
We'll see.
But
I'll say this: she is not like Acker and Blacker. Like this.
No.
This is like a pretty straightforward Star Wars book.
Yeah, her story too is about. It was called Change of Heart, and what it's about is it's about the Imperial. I guess the unidentified Imperial Navy trooper, the guy who comes into the detention block with Vader and the torture ball.
Oh, okay.
Whenever they go to interrogate Leia, and like it's about how like he like felt bad for Leia essentially during that whole thing while she's tortured.
Classic. That's, you know what, you want to talk about what I don't love about the Disney Star Wars, and I say that in quotes with heavy ironic detachment, but you know what I don't love about it is maybe I've talked about this, the constant, like, we gotta make the Imperials sympathetic. Like, not that I don't want that at all. I love Lost Stars, and, like, there's versions of that I enjoy, but, like, come on. Like, they're also just bad. Like,
yeah.
They're also just Nazis. Like yes. Let's be real, that's what they are. And, like, obviously not every Nazi soldier was, like, a monster. I don't believe in calling any human beings monsters. I think dehumanizing anyone is usually bad, even if they're terrible people. But we're talking about Nazis here. We're not talking about, like, Imperial troops are bad. They're bad. They're bad guys. They're bad guys. I care about the shades of gray and morality when we're talking about main characters, but, like, come on. Like, I don't know, whatever. I don't have a fully formed thought on this. It's just it's just a frustrating thing.
But this also makes me think of I rewatched the Gergerod deleted scenes from Return of the Jedi where he's given the order to blow up Endor and he, like, struggles with it, but, like, he still does it.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Obviously showing the humanity of these people is fine. And obviously he still went through with torturing her, so I guess...
Yeah, they're still Nazis.
Yeah.
So even though they feel bad about it, they still did it. So anyway, Elizabeth, these are some very quick notes. I got most of this from her biography on her website. She was born in New York, moved to England at age 3, spent her formative years studying in Jamaica. She eventually ended up in Harrisburg. She went to Yale and then got her PhD in folklore at the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yep, she grew up reading the Hardy Boys.
I wonder if
King
any of my
Arthur.
Professors know her. I have a professor who's a folklorist, and
you should ask.
I should ask.
Do you know this person? She grew up reading Tolkien. She wrote her first epic fantasy novel at 14, and her website says one contemporary reader described it as the stupidest book I've ever read. But in retrospect, she claims that it was good practice. In 1991, she met her husband, an Englishman named Tim.
Okay.
And he had a passion for flying, and together they both have their pilot's license, and they've flown all over the world.
Oh man!
And a lot of her recent books, she's written. Some of her most recent books are like. They're entitled Rose Under Fire, Black Dove, and White Raven, and most of them focus on female pilots during the Second World War.
Cool.
And something about this book, there's no biography in the back of this book.
Well, we have the British edition.
Oh, that's true. Yes, we do.
We got this as a half-price books back over the summer, and at the same time, and yeah, so. It has a different cover. It's a paperback, so...
Yeah. She does say something about that she wants to thank Harry Grinch for his list of names and the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum for the fabulous flight on their Lancaster bomber. So it seems like for a bit of a research, she actually rode like on a bomber plane for this book, since they mostly are on a resistance bomber, the Hammer, Tim.
The Hammer. So... Yeah, no, this is cool. Like, I thought, as far as her writing goes, I thought it was very solid. Like, she's, I thought the action was very clear and precise. And you hinted at the length of this book during our break, and that's true. It is 250 pages long, which is long for this show. Not long in reality, but I'll say this, like, again, which is, and I don't consider this a flaw, so I just want to be clear about that. This covers about the same amount of story as your average, like, Jude book, which is, like, what, 120 to 140 pages.
Yeah.
But I'll say that's also true of something like Master and Apprentice, which is an adult novel. Like, when you're writing... This is not technically a young adult book, but that's really what it is. Like, would you agree with this?
I would agree with that,
I don't think that these are, like, officially slated as young readers' books, so they fit in our thing. Like, we're going to have another one of these, Spark of the Resistance, in a couple weeks, right before Rise of Skywalker. But they're really closer to a young adult book in style and length, which is fine. But usually, the younger you go, like, it's the same amount of story, just compressed further.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't want to get it confused with, like, just I'm not used to reading Star Wars books this long anymore because of this stupid podcast. With this is worse because it's, like, slower or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's all I got to say about her. There are 2 illustrations in this book. They are by Phil Noto.
Yeah,
even though he's
been around for a long time.
I think he did the Join the Resistance illustration.
No, he didn't.
No.
He did Guardians of the Wills. He's also done Before the Awakening. Smugglers. He's done practically all of the books that we would cover from the new canon. I think he's a great comic book artist. Like, he's actually mostly a comic book cover artist. Some of the interiors he's done, I think he did the first, like, the Angel and Faith thing, which was Buffy season 9 or whatever, like, in the comics. I think he did that, or he might have just done the covers on that, but he's done some interiors, but he mostly is a cover guy. Talented, but,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't need illustrations in these books. Like,
sure. I don't get mad at them. They're fine.
Every one of these new canon books has pictures in it. I don't need pictures, Disney. But they seem to think that the book won't sell without them. That's all I got to say.
Also makes them more expensive. I mean, that's the other thing.
Right. What the hell, Disney? You think they'd be trying to make these as cheap as possible.
I realize this is priced at £6.99 on the back, because there's a UK edition. We went to Half Price Books. I think they marked it at $3 for us, which is not the conversion rate. Like, I'm just saying. So, props to them on that. Anyway,
all right.
So
the summary.
Yeah, you wrote a summary. I
did, and I tried to keep it short. It's shorter than, like, the detailed notes I would take for a Jude book. Of course, we already know this story is about Rose and Paige Tico and their 2 to 3 other crewmates aboard the Hammer. I don't know their names. I didn't look back in the book. These characters are so peripheral.
We're not going to talk about them.
They are not important to the story. So the story begins with them going to the Atera system, a system consisting of 2 sister planets, Atera Alpha and Atera Bravo, and there's an asteroid belt in between them armed with laser cannons. There's been reports of a First Order blockade, so Leia sent the Hammer, that's the ship they're on, to send some probe droids to each planet and do some scouting. So the mission goes mostly smoothly, but as they're getting ready to leave, they see a squadron of TIE fighters chasing a very small starship. The pursued ship approaches their ship, and as they're closing the bomb doors at the bottom of the ship, as seen in Last Jedi, because that's where the probe droids are coming up, the ship that's being chased boards their ship, and with the TIE fighters closing in, they have no choice. They have to make the jump to light speed with the stowaways on board. These stowaways are Kazka Panzoro and her grandson Reeve Panzoro. And Kazka is a representative of the Firestone Tire Island on Atera Bravo. And it was just Firestone. It seemed weird to me they called it Firestone. It made me immediately think of the tires.
You know what it makes me think of is the Firestone Christmas albums from the 50s, which...
oh, yes. You can find it any Goodwill.
You can find them anywhere. But some good stuff. You got some good gems on those.
Oh, yeah. So when they reach the Resistance base, she tells Leia about how Atera Bravo has acidic seas and that the inhabitants rely on moisture farms and importing fresh water from Atera Alpha. But the First Order has put a stop to this with the blockade, and they have seized all the moisture farms. So now the people of Atera Bravo are dying of thirst. She says they have formed a small resistance back on Atera Bravo, but the lack of water, food, and weapons prevent them from fighting back. They need help. So Leia, she wants to believe the story. She doesn't know if it's true. So she sends Rose and Paige back to Atera Bravo on a fact-finding mission. They take the grandson Reeve along as a guide, and turns out the tale is true. And while they're there, they see a First Order death squad. And this death squad apparently gathers people up. They take them into a prison out in space, which has no atmospheric control, so people just die in the vacuum of space in this prison. Then they ship the people back down to the planet and dump them in the acidic ocean where they dissolve. So Rose and Paige, they feel for the plight of the Atera system because it reminds them of their home world, Hayes Minor, which also had a sister planet, Hayes Major, and their planet 2 came under the rule of the First Order, who poisoned the skies. They, of course, escaped, but both of their parents died in the process. From here, they develop a series of supply drops to Atera Bravo. They have to set up a base on this planet, Reefnu. It's this in-between Dakar, where the Resistance base is, and Atera. So the Resistance sends 11 bombers. She sends all of Cobalt Squadron and then a couple others. There's 11 bombers in total. They make the first run all together as one squadron. They drop the supplies. Basically, they use the bomb canisters. They fill them with supplies and they drop them. But at the end of the mission, they attract a small group of TIE fighters. They blow them all to bits, but one who gets away. They return safely, but they're worried that one TIE fighter that got away may, tell his higher-ranking officials back, and they may be waiting for them.
Hux? And you're talking about Hux?
Maybe.
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 There needs to be a Hux book. Where is my Hux book?
I agree. I bet Hux is going to... I can't wait for Hux in this next book. And him and Richard E. Grant.
Oh.
See, there was a new photo of Richard E. Grant, too, that just came out.
I'm very happy with Richard E. Grant being in the movie. And he'll do great as the First Order guy. But I was kind of hoping he'd be a good guy. Because he's just such a sweet sweet man.
He's being very typecast as a he's an English guy who can be intimidating.
I wanted him to be like closer to like a Withnail type character, where it's just like
that would have been a lot of fun.
Like he could have been a good guy, but like kind of a scoundrel, like in a drunk or something. Would have been delightful, but whatever, it's fine.
Nah.
He'll be good.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
He's never bad.
He isn't. The best thing about Spice World, him and Meatloaf.
Oh, incredible in Spice World. Incredible in Spice World.
I want to rewatch that movie just because
that movie is like basically a remake of Hard Day's Night. Like, you know that, right? Like that is really what it is doing.
What I remember about that movie is there's an alien sequence where these aliens come out and they're fans of the Spice Girls, and one of the aliens gropes one of the Spice Girls, if I remember correctly.
Well, 1997, what a wild time.
It was a wild time. So sure enough, the next day they go back to the Atera system, all as a group, and there's 36 TIE fighters waiting for them. They, of course, have to retreat. They lose 4 bombers in the process. They regroup, and then they make up this new plan where they're going to send two bombers in at a time. They're going to enter from the system at different points, and one will be loaded with supplies, one won't be. So the one without supplies will be more maneuverable, and they can, help defend the one that is loaded. They do this. But they face little resistance because the day before, when they lost the 4 bombers, when they were coming home, there was this disturbance, and nobody knows what it is. Everybody says that there was this big light.
I'll read a little bit from this because I picked this section, this bit out that was on page 226. So many pages. Okay. So, yeah, just... here we go. What in the name of the galaxy is that? Finch muttered as he set the coordinates for the local flight to Refnu.
The pilot of the Hammer, by the way.
Yeah, what are you going to do? It's messing with the electronics. I have to punch everything in 4 or 5 times before it takes. Listen, Finch, I know how you feel with audacity. Okay, Nix came to lean over, whatever. You know what? Listen, this is not what I wanted to read. But there was another bit here that I found particularly interesting. Oh, here we are. You all felt the disruption? Fossil asked again. He's like the commander. In disbelief. You all felt it during the journey through hyperspace? Like, that's the other thing. They're on their way back through hyperspace and they feel this disturbance. Everyone nodded.
And it's like a physical disturbance, too.
Yeah.
It's not like a force disturbance.
Right, yeah,
so.
like nobody's, yeah. There's even a scene earlier where where Leia's talking about how she feels about something, and Rose is like, I feel it too. And she's like, not in like a force way like you're talking about, but... So anyway... everyone nodded. We felt it too, said the captain of the transport, like hitting a wall, like a disruption in the space-time continuum, like a disruption in... The transport pilot left his sentence hanging, but Rose thought that everyone there must know what he was thinking. A disruption in the Force. So, they'd all heard stories of how the Death Star had blown up an entire world. General Leia Organa's homeworld of Alderaan in the last years of the Empire. But that had been before most of the bomber squadron crews were born, and the galaxy was essentially at peace now, apart from the rumblings of the First Order as they stretched for sovereignty among the Outer Rim and the independent star systems. And not even the destruction of a planet could have such a stunning and far-reaching impact on the rest of the galaxy. Everyone knew that an old star exploded now and then somewhere across the vast distances of the universe. It didn't produce a shock like this. What had happened? So they don't know, and
right.
I thought that was actually... Listen, this is something we've said about a lot of these new canon books. They do a better job explaining the state of things than the movies do.
And this has something else I want to say about this book, because it was Join the Resistance that revealed to us, one of the things they revealed to us out of nothing was the fact that the First Order was in the Senate of the New Republic. They had representation in the Senate, and this book on page 39 reconfirms that. So they said... if any of the probes were caught with the information they now carried, it would raise diplomatic questions that could have huge consequences in the New Republic Senate. Who sent the probe droids and why? They were in First Order territory without authorization. The First Order could claim some sort of treaty violation, and Leia's case against them would be ruined.
Yeah, that's
so,
the status quo. It makes so much more sense and is much more compelling, and they should have leaned into that in the movie. I want to see those deleted scenes from Force Awakens with Leia at the Senate. Like, that that exists. We know those exist, right?
Yes, we do.
And, like, are those on the 3D Blu-ray or some bullshit? Or, like,
I don't know.
Because I never bought that because it was, like, $50 all the time.
We should check the deleted scenes on Disney+.
I will look later. Okay.
Yes.
I really want to see that scene. Although I feel like they might have reconstituted a lot of that for Rise of Skywalker.
For other things,
that
yes.
stuff might not be available. Anyway. So basically, yeah, they feel this disturbance on the way home. They wind up taking, what's her name, Casca?
Yeah, they take her home because they got to do one more supply run. They take Casca home. They face no First Order resistance on the way. The First Order presence has seemed to vanish after this disturbance.
But,
and then they drop her off. They say goodbye, and then they come back to base where Holdo, Vice Amelin Holdo, congratulates
them. A great character that is undeniable. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. And she congratulates them on a job well done, and then she tells them that, the disturbance you felt was a weapon that, of course, wiped out an entire star system from the First Order, and then they're all in shock. And then and then she's like, "Oh well, but by the way, we took care of it already. We've already destroyed it." And then she says, "Well, I'm in desperate need of technicians on my ship. Rose was a technician on the ship, and she says, I need you to come on my ship." While, the rest of your squadron does their thing, explaining where Rose is during the opening events of Last Jedi and why she did not die with her sister, and that's pretty much the end of the book.
So yeah, this the book, a couple things before we get into our final thoughts. I just wanted to talk about, I think the relationship between Rose and Paige is, pretty well drawn here, and does probably make their relationship... I haven't watched Last Jedi since I finished this book 2 hours ago, but I think their relationship here probably does enrich those moments of the movie. So that's the goal of something like this, to be fair. I liked a lot of the character work in this between those two characters. A lot of the supporting cast I thought was pretty bland.
Forgettable.
Not really memorable. But
Oh, well, you continue. Finish your idea.
You're drinking something. What? Milk?
No, it was water. Just some water.
I thought you said milk.
No. I didn't say anything.
Big, tall cup of milk, right?
It's straight out of the carton, Tim.
Oh man, a whole gallon
on a hot day.
Yeah, great idea. So I don't know. Anyway, I thought that the supporting cast I didn't think was all that interesting. I liked the scenes we got with Leia. There was an interesting thing near the end there. I thought that the stowaways who represented the Atarian people were compelling enough as if this were a series, if this were something like Jedi Apprentice, they're compelling enough one book characters, if you know what I mean. So
yeah,
but I liked the scene where in the last scene of the book, after Holdo offers the job to Rose, it calls back to this moment where Reeve, the kid, has to choose whether he's going to stay on the planet or return to his grandmother, and this and I thought that was that was a good parallel of these people that are making these choices to potentially never see the person they love ever again, and obviously true for Rose at the end here. But
it's because the character of what the hell's his name? Reeve. So Reeve depends a lot on his grandmother, and then Paige. Rose depends on her older sister, but it's this older sister dynamic, and Paige has this thing where it's I have to protect you, I'm your older sister, and the whole thing in the end is Rose, I can make decisions on my own, and I still have your support regardless, kind of thing. That's kind of the big thing. That's that's where the story comes full circle in the whole grand scheme of things.
And the other big thing it's about is they kind of go back to again and again is this idea of Rose's fear and her kind of skittishness, which is obviously present in the film also. Her fear that she's not good enough to step up and be heroic the way that her sister is, or later, Finn is. It plays into one of the things I really like about Last Jedi, regardless of how it explores it and how your feelings about that. It's really an exploration of failure, which is just nice to see in a big blockbuster. It happens sometimes, but it's an exploration of what happens when somebody fails and they have a support system around them, which obviously she builds with Finn and with... it's not just her, obviously. Luke is the primary vessel for this, obviously, in the story, but I think there's a lot of value there in exploring kind of negative, what are perceived as negative emotions through the kind of Star Wars storytelling prism, which is very, simple and direct, but like is able to explore all kinds of emotions and all kinds of real world human relationships. I think Last Jedi does a good job of that, and this kind of plays into that. Again, I don't think this is, I think, yeah. What do you think?
What I was going to tell you was what you just said was very insightful, and I wanted you to know that, Tim.
Okay.
So I really liked what you just said about failure and Last Jedi and how this book plays into that. Something I am going to agree with you on that you touched upon is Leia in this book. We've seen Leia now in this book. We've seen Leia in Galaxy of Fear, and we've seen Leia in Join the Resistance.
Oh yeah, we did, didn't we?
And we've seen her in Jedi Prince, of course. I think this so far is the best depiction we've seen of Leia. And the reason I say that, and Galaxy of Fear comes in a close second. Reason I don't put Galaxy of Fear above it is because, like,
it's small.
The main characters are from Alderaan, and they tell her we're from Alderaan, and she's just like, oh, that's nice. But in this book, there's a moment, I don't have it marked here, where, like, they're talking about Altera Bravo and feeling for the plight of it.
And they're talking about Rose and Paige.
Right, and their planet being basically poisoned by the First Order, and Leia's just like, oh, I feel for you every day because of Alderaan. Like,
that's a great scene.
I'm not saying that every depiction of Leia needs to have her feeling remorse about her home planet being destroyed, but it's like, this gets it. This gets Leia's heart in a way the other books haven't.
It makes sense when it's a direct connection that she would make. There's no way any human that has been through what she's been through would make. That's another reason that is one thing I'll say. This book, again, sold the Hosnian Prime thing because of all the references to Alderaan. It sold that the cataclysm of that far better than The Force Awakens does.
Yes, I agree.
Because that really feels like nothing when it happens in that movie. Like, not nothing, but it feels like just like this is the inciting incident. And I know some people like to be revisionists and pretend like that's how Alderaan's blowing up feels, but that just happens quickly in that movie. But like the film language that is used there, like when it cuts back to Leia's face and all that stuff, it makes sense. And a popular thing to do on the internet is talk about how she's consoling Luke after Obi-Wan dies. That's like a famous meme or whatever. You've probably seen this. And but her whole planet that's just because that's who the character is, and that's like what makes her interesting is that she puts everything of herself behind everyone else around her, and that's not like to actually suppress it. It's because of the trauma she's experienced that she's like that. So I think that what I liked about her depiction here, so much better than the Join the Resistance thing, which just feels like so. I know we've harped on this, but that's it's not that she's bad in those books, but it just feels just so fawning. It's it's this oh, she's so cool, basically, which yeah, she is, but she's just not a real person in those books, and nobody is. That's the problem with those. But she just feels I like the moment where the two refugees, when she tells them who she is, and they recognize it. They're like, oh, I like that moment where it's yeah, she knows she's this huge deal, but she's acts like a real person in this in a way that she just doesn't in the Join the Resistance books. I love her in the two new movies. I think her performance, especially in Last Jedi, great. I love her in that movie. But
yep, and shout out to Claudia Gray. Leia book is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that book is not technically. Again, this feels like the same age group as that book to me. But that book is the best version of Leia I've ever read on the page. I would say it's honestly disgraceful that there's really only been one truly devoted to Leia book ever. And
Right.
two. And they're both written by Claudia Gray. That and Bloodline. So like, and the fact they both came out in the last like 5 years is embarrassing.
I know.
One of those three main characters of Star Wars. It's so weird.
Now this is where I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
While I like the lesson that's learned between Paige and Rose facing her fear, and Rose making like, independent decisions for herself, not needing her sister to make her decisions for her. That's good. I think the depiction of them as sisters is just generic and fine. Like, I don't think there's so much development. There's a ton of development here. And for being 250 pages, a lot of their time spent together is just thinking about, oh, these planets remind us of our planet.
Or making plans,
this planet Reefnu reminds us of the constant twilight on our home planet. Like, all they do is just talk about their home planet a lot in 250 pages. So that's something I don't love it. And all the other characters, especially the pilot I believe there's another character who we probably see in Last Jedi. Finch or Nix, is it?
I don't know. Yeah,
they're probably in Last Jedi.
I don't know,
but they get no personality.
That's a frustration for me, because I don't disagree about the sister relationship being fairly generic. I just mean it hits the mark of like, if the goal is essentially to add a little extra weight to those moments in the movie,
it did what it needed.
It does
to do.
That's really all I meant by that. This was the biggest disappointment of this book for me was the crew, because I think I've mentioned this on the show before. My favorite like Star Wars expanded universe stuff, or the stuff that was the most formative that I read when I was a kid that I loved the most, was the X-Wing series. And
I was going to actually bring these up with these, because this book is very ship-oriented, and I've never read those books, and I was wondering if this reminded you of those.
It does in the most superficial ways, but I thought But the thing about the X-Wing books that's great is that the characters are so indelible. It's like Wedge is the leader, but you have like all these other great characters like Tycho and Corin Horn, and who becomes a big kind of Jedi character. But there's a lot of great characters. Especially those first 4 books by Michael A. Stackpole. I really just love those books, that's why I was excited to maybe rejoin the Resistance. And obviously, I think the way to go is to read an adult novel. But I don't know. Like, I want something of that in that vein. I would love like a TV show in that vein that takes place. I would love them to not just adapt those books, but essentially create like an X-Wing or a Rogue Squadron TV show with Wedge and assorted cast members. You could maybe use some of the characters from those books if you want. That takes place after Return of the Jedi. I would love that. But who knows? The future's wide open when it comes to that stuff. But.
Yep. So, I got one last thought, and that's last night I turned on New Hope to watch the McClunky scene with Greedo, which I think it's actually very well done. The way the shot looks, very well done.
This is I think. Did I talk about this last week?
Yeah, we talked about this already,
okay.
So this is not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is during the Death Star assault, whenever it's like Luke and Wedge are left, and Wedge gets hit, and like Luke's just like, Wedge, get out of here, you don't need to be here, and Wedge is just like, sorry. Like, the way he just says sorry and just zooms out, it's like really funny.
I love it. I love Wedge Antilles. He might want. We don't need to bring up the open wound of our argument about whether he should be in episode 9.
He'll be in it. It'll be fine.
It will be fine. But regardless, I love Wedge, but I really love Wedge mostly because of the expanded universe, the books and the comics. So I would love to see them do more with him in general. I would say not just in the movies, but like again, I think a whole TV show about Wedge would be cool. You can recast Wedge as a young Wedge. That's fine. Nobody's going to be mad.
He'd be so pissed.
Oh, well, he'll be fine. No, I don't think he'd be mad about that. Like, if it's like a younger Wedge that would be like right after Return of the Jedi.
That's true.
You could do that. That's not a problem. Nobody's, again, that's not a Harrison Ford style, like, iconic performance, even though we all like Solo, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so let's get to our final thoughts, because we've actually stretched this episode longer than I expected. The Cobalt Squadron, I went over my thoughts, basically. This book, I think, is perfectly serviceable. I think it adds a little extra depth to Rose. If you want some good Leia stuff, if you want some good context, again, more context is finally slipping into my mind about the situation in the galaxy. If you want that, it's worth checking out. I don't think it's the best. I still think this and Guardians of the Whills are kind of on a similar level for me. So like something like a 6.5 midi-chlorians is probably what I would give it.
Yep. This book, if I had to choose what's the best new canon thing that we've read, I think I would put Guardians of the Will above this, just because I think the character dynamic between Baze and Chirrut is so much better depicted than the characters in this book. So, but I would put this number 2. Like, this is probably the second best new canon book that's in our age range that we've read on this series.
I agree.
So that being said, I'm going to give it like a 5, middle of the road 5. I do also want to say last week I cursed. I dropped an F-bomb because as I picked up my book, I discovered my book was sopping wet. I tried to dry my book for about 3 days until finally I had to pick it up and start reading it, or I would not be done in time for this. And I want to say today, a week later, this book is still wet.
That's
like if
wild.
you put your fingers down in the spine, like it is sopping wet.
I remember I remember in literally within a couple days of each other when I was in, I don't know, 5th grade or something, 4th grade, peak of Animorphs stuff happening. I remember 2 books, the Andalite Chronicles, which was a prequel to Animorphs, very cool, very good stuff. The Andalite Chronicles, I remember I had in my backpack, and it was pouring rain at the bus stop, and it got water damage, and then I dropped another Animorphs book like 3 days later into the toilet. Wild
it
stuff.
Morphed after that for
Animorphs
sure.
was cursed in my house, is what I'm saying. Anyway, we both gave it our ratings.
Yep, and tying it back to Animorphs, next week we are reading Jedi Quest, which is one of the artists on these book covers is, what's his name again?
The Animorphs boy.
David Mattingly, who did the Animorphs covers, so that's where...
And the next one there is the Dangerous Games, which looks like we got some pod racing action.
Oh, have you read the back of this book
yet? No, not yet.
Okay, you know what? Read it. Do you have it near you?
Yeah.
Just read it to yourself right now.
Okay, you need to vamp a little.
Okay. Yeah, so, I'll do the normal thing. So, if you like Padawan Library, rate and review us, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, 5 stars only. Reviews. He finished reading it. Yes! Spoiler alert, Sebulba is back.
All right.
Chesko Sebulba.
Oh, thank God. So, that'll be coming out on Black Friday. We better record on Wednesday.
Yes, we better, because I have a lot going on Thursday.
Thursday is busy for me. So, but I'll be off school a few days on Tuesday, so we'll be good to do Wednesday. So anyway, next week, Dangerous Games, rate, review us, all that crap you said, all that while I was reading, right?
Yes, follow iTunes, not iTunes, subscribe on iTunes, follow us on all the social medias, and yeah.
And don't be a doofus on social media.
Yeah.
Don't comment with your just like
it's a 3-strike rule.
Leave that to you.
Okay.
Leave it to YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. If you're coming on the Instagram and you're posting hostility,
not on our YouTube, by the way, other people's YouTube.
Yes. But this certain character, he posted on 3 of our photos. He gave me nothing but hostility, and on the last post, I warned him. I did it on purpose. If you were coming at Rose with anything, your library card was getting torn up in front of you. And he commented with some BS saying how The Last Jedi is the second worst Star Wars movie behind Force Awakens, and I replied to his comment, and I put in all caps, "Canceled. You are canceled," and I blocked him immediately. So don't come at us with that.
Oh boy.
3 strikes, you're out.
Well, listen. We put this show out, and yeah, it's a conversation, obviously, but it's mostly a conversation between you and me.
I know.
And, I'm glad we have fans, and obviously we want to... But, don't be actively hostile towards us and our interests on our stuff. This is just basic... I'm sure that guy probably thinks his, First Amendment rights are being violated or some nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
It's but they're not! So, we're just people, and this is something we do for fun. We want to have fun when we're talking about Star Wars. Not saying we can't. I
agree.
Not saying we don't criticize things. Not saying you can't criticize things, but the way he did it, it's just he was this far away from saying we were Disney shills or something.
Well, when he first came at our boy Filoni, he of course popped right up on our radar. We should not
talk about this endlessly. I might cut this.
All right, don't cut this
until
the books are due back.
The library's closed.
Your library cards are safe for the time being.
Padawan Library is hosted and produced by Tim May and Levi Peretic. It is edited by Tim May. Our theme song is by the Astral Project. Our artwork is by Freddie Funbuns. Padawan Library is copyright 2019 by Tim May and Levi Peretic. All rights reserved.